The story of King Sudhir and the wise counsel. In the land of Rajapura, there reigned a wise and kind king named Sudhir. His kingdom was known for its prosperity, but like any ruler, he faced many challenges. One day, King Sudhir received a visit from 4 of his most trusted ministers, each with a different concern about how to handle certain difficult individuals in the kingdom. The first minister, who was responsible for the treasury, came to the king and said, "Your Majesty, we have a man in the kingdom, a merchant named Devraj, who is incredibly covetous. He desires to acquire more wealth, often to the detriment of the well-being of others. He is constantly haggling over prices and refusing to contribute to the greater good of the kingdom. How do we deal with such a man?" The second minister, who was in charge of law and order, spoke up, "Sire, we also have a man named Banu, who is known for his obstinate nature. He refuses to listen to reason and often causes unnecessary conflicts in the town. We have tried to reason with him, but he will not budge from his position. What should we do with such a person?" The third minister, responsible for education and the welfare of the people, added, "Your Majesty, we also have a fool in the kingdom named Raghav. He is harmless but speaks an acts without any understanding. He does not follow any logical reasoning, and his actions often lead to confusion. How should we handle someone like him?" Finally, the fourth minister, the most learned of all, said, "Your Majesty, we have a scholar named Vedan who is respected by all for his wisdom. However, I have noticed that he can sometimes become arrogant, and his pride in his knowledge causes him to dismiss others. How should we address this?" King Sudhir listened to each of his ministers with great care. He knew that every person, regardless of their character, needed to be dealt with in a manner that would bring about a positive result, without causing unnecessary conflict. After a moment of silence, he called for a meeting of his advisors and spoke to them wisely. "Dear ministers," the king began, "I have pondered your concerns, and I believe the solution lies in understanding the nature of each person and adjusting our approach accordingly." The tale of the 4 approaches. The king turned to the first minister and said, "Devraj, the covetous merchant, is driven by his desire for wealth. To conciliate him, we must offer him a gift, something that speaks to his greed. By satisfying his desire for material things, we can calm his mind and perhaps even steer him toward using his wealth for the good of the kingdom." Turning to the second minister, King Sudhir continued, "As for Banu, the obstinate man, we must approach him with humility. Sometimes, the best way to deal with obstinacy is not through forceful reasoning, but by folding our hands in respectful salutation. This humble gesture may soften his heart and make him more receptive to cooperation." The king then addressed the third minister, "Raghav, the fool, is harmless but easily led astray. The best way to deal with a fool is to humor him, to go along with his words and actions, even if they seem nonsensical. By not opposing him directly, we avoid unnecessary conflict and allow him to feel heard, without making him aware of his ignorance." Finally, the king turned to the fourth minister and said, "Vedan, the learned scholar, is proud of his knowledge, but his arrogance could lead him to dismiss others. The best way to deal with a learned man like him is to speak to him with truth and honesty. He respects knowledge, and through honest, respectful words, we can challenge his pride without provoking him." The test of wisdom. King Sudhir decided to put his theory to the test. He called for a grand assembly in the palace, where all 4 individuals, Devraj the covetous merchant, Banu the obstinate man, Raghav the fool, and Vedan the scholar, were invited. When the covetous merchant, Devraj, entered the assembly, King Sudhir greeted him with a beautiful tapestry and a chest of gold coins. "Devraj," the king said with a smile, "this is a token of my appreciation for your industriousness. I hope this gift brings you prosperity and peace." Devraj's eyes sparkled with greed as he accepted the gift. He was immediately mollified and began to think of ways he could use the king's generosity to further enrich himself. Next, Banu, the obstinate man, was brought in. King Sudhir approached him with respect and folded his hands in a humble salutation. "Banu, I respect your strong convictions, and I hope we can find a way to work together for the good of the kingdom," the king said. Banu, taken aback by the king's humility, softened and agreed to discuss the matter without his usual resistance. When Raghav, the fool, arrived, King Sudhir greeted him with a light heart and indulged him in conversation, letting Raghav speak freely. "Raghav, your thoughts are always so interesting. I would love to hear more of your ideas," the king said with a smile. Raghav beamed with joy, not noticing that the king was humoring him. He felt validated and continued to speak enthusiastically, unaware of the confusion he caused. Lastly, Vedan, the learned scholar, was brought in. King Sudhir looked at him and spoke directly and truthfully, "Vedan, your knowledge is vast, and your wisdom has contributed greatly to this kingdom. But I must tell you, sometimes, even the learned must listen more than speak. It is through humility that true wisdom is acquired." Vedan, surprised by the king's candidness, paused and reflected on the words. Instead of dismissing them, he acknowledged the truth in them and silently considered how he might improve. The outcome. At the end of the assembly, each of the 4 men had been approached in a manner that suited their nature. Devraj, the covetous man, was more agreeable, his greed satisfied by the gift. Bhanu, the obstinate one, had been softened by the king's humility and was more open to collaboration. Raghav, the fool, felt respected and important, which kept him content and harmless. Vedant, the scholar, had been humbled by the truth and was willing to consider the king's advice with an open mind. King Sudhir turned to his ministers and said, "Each of these men requires a different approach. A covetous man must be conciliated with gifts, an obstinate man with humility, a fool with indulgence, and a learned man with the truth." By understanding the nature of each person, we can bring about peace and cooperation, rather than conflict. Moral of the story: the key to dealing with different kinds of people is to understand their nature and to respond accordingly. A covetous man should be appeased with gifts, an obstinate man with humility, a fool with patience, and a learned man with truth. By tailoring your approach to the individual, you can resolve conflicts and foster harmony in your relationships. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to give it a like, share it with others who might benefit, and subscribe to the channel for more valuable content like this. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.